a great source of inspiration for the hobby. Models from all over famous hobbies that are related or within our general miniature sphere can be found here. You're talking about Gunpla, World War One, World War Two, historicals, fictional, science fictional, fantasy, diorama, automotive stuff, and of course minis are all found here in our chapter's IPMS Nationals Philippines. Here you're exposed to different hobbies and interests that have existed way before our miniature hobby existed. Actually, I'm not so quite sure about that. But what I am quite sure about is I want to take you through all the small, tiny things I've sort of picked up or noticed during my stay at IPMS Nationals. Now, IPMS or the International Plastic Modelers Society is a chapter-based group which I'm not so sure much about of the history, but I am quite aware that almost all countries around the world have their own version of IPMS. And this talks about models from all over the globe. So the world of miniatures truly is quite mini when you put it next to all these massive hobbyists and hobbies out there. Now to take a look at a few of these related hobbies, the more popular one we have here is probably Gunpla tied with our World War or historical aficionados. Now when you're talking about Gunpla, especially in the competitive scene, you're talking about a lot of people who have a lot of patience and dexterity when it comes to building. Relating that to miniature hobbies, a lot of us barely take the time to refine our building. We may think that cleaning our edge lines, filling in our gaps, and kit bashing is the pinnacle of building, but when you're looking at Gunpla hobbyists, you're looking at people who see a flat panel of metal and they will scribe their own line just to make that flat panel of metal more interesting. And when I say scribe, they take a small metal chisel and they chisel out a straight edge just to look like one panel of plastic is now two. This is before painting, this is before priming, and this is before building. So take a look at your miniature sprues right now and look at the different parts that you have and think about scribing or etching out your own details before even building that. Let alone these people put more emphasis in the perfection of the build than the perfection of the paint. And the beauty about this is that because there's not a lot of miniature war games, or there's barely any miniature war games for the Gunpla community, a lot of the painting is really focused on display. So you don't have a lot of paint formulas, you don't have a lot of quick and easy paint techniques, but what you have are a lot of paint techniques to achieve a certain look, a certain gloss, a certain metal. And it's not just always a simple base coat wash highlight. In fact, a lot of these modelers use the airbrush, they use sub-assemblies, and very rarely will you see someone using their hand brush, but maybe just to fine-tune some details or to make some weathering or their own freehand on the Gunpla. Then when we look at the World War II or historical side, a lot of the discipline here is in terms of the accuracy. And when I say accuracy, not just in terms of choosing the correct and accurate color, which is a whole different world, but also making sure the exact bit, the exact camouflage, the exact type of weathering and dirt appears in the correct scene that you are depicting. When you're looking at our miniatures and we want to create a nice base, we just talk about what's interesting, we talk about contrast, we talk about maybe the lore and the home world of our miniature. But when we're talking about people in historicals, when they're talking about an Afghanistan tank, they know or they study how the dust shoots up on the tank, the color of the dust compared to it being wet on the thread of the tank and dry on the boots of the soldier. Those things are studied, and most of the time they're not the same paint. Whereas for our case, we mostly just dry brush that thing and call it a day. Again, because the World War II hobby is, or modeling hobby, I would assume is not about playing a war game, although there are a lot of war games that exist now for the World War II scene. It's about depicting a scene in history or depicting an imagined scene. It brings in the viewer to believe that what miniature they're looking at is indeed real, and that requires the accurate color of the paint relating to the time of day. I've once had this discussion with a few hobbyists in there where they're talking about the specific color of a tank, whereas accurately it's this one color, but the color does change depending on where the sun is set on Earth. So if you're depicting this tank to be a diorama in the afternoon and in the evening, you're gonna have to change the color of your paint. Albeit we do that for our dioramas and our miniatures sometimes, but this type of conversation is quite common when coming up with a color scheme for your tanks and other World War II figures. Moving it a little bit relating to that, you're talking about scale models. So scale models, not just relating to World War II stuff, you got scale models from all sorts. You got scale models from our modern times up to way back when. And these models or dioramas, I believe, are also after believability. I believe they're after making sure the viewer is drawn into the scene and making sure they are taken to a state of disbelief where they're not looking at a toy, but they're looking at the miniature scale real thing. Special mention here is this paper, handmade, built from scratch space station. And you can tell the person who made this is incredibly detail-oriented. It's one of my favorite pieces of this event, and it's quite spectacular to see. Coming from a miniature painter where the objective is to get all our miniatures done, you're looking at people in the Gunpla society, you're looking at people in the World War and scale modeler societies, and they're not after exactly limiting their backlog, but they're taking their time to make sure each project they have is perfect, is accurate, is acceptable. And that type of discipline is quite different for us, where we paint mostly because we want to make sure our models are ready for the meta of the game that we're playing. Our models are ready for playing with our casual friends in the weekend. To them, the only deadline is competitions like this, and they take more time to really build each project. Kudos to the man who has created this project in the first place. Then, of course, if you go somewhere a little bit closer to our scene, which is the fictional scene, it's more than just miniatures. Miniatures are actually a small component in the fictional sci-fi diorama, where the models displayed in this venue. Because you'll see here people explore other things beside just the miniature aspect or the gaming aspect, but you have a lot of display busts, and you can really explore how people take a look at fictional stuff, because while there aren't a lot of available kits commercially for these things, you can see people turn to a lot of interesting 3D print or scratch built techniques to get the kit or build they want, then proceed to the painting. And when I'm looking at the models here, I can sort of get the similarities of where we're going at. While again, these fictional busts aren't exactly for playing, but it's easier for me to tell the techniques used, as color accuracy, factual accuracy is not as important as to making it just look amazing, cool, and sci-fi. In the whole general of things, the message of this video is to really take art in all forms in itself and find ways that you can appreciate it and sort of build onto your hobby. You may be in a tabletop miniature scene for various different reasons, but for whatever reason that may be, I'm sure there's something you can pick up when looking at models from outside the hobby, be it a painting technique, the mere appreciation for the models that you have, or just downright inspiration just to get the juices flowing. Interacting with modelers, events, and tangent hobbies related to ours also adds a sort of breath of fresh air, especially when we're feeling in the rut. There are lots of ways that we can take advantage of our miniature hobby experience, or lots of ways we can take advantage of interacting with other hobbyists out there. Now, a little bit more about IPMS. You're looking at nationals, so those are all the islands of the Philippines sending their models here to Manila to be displayed and to be won contests. I actually won third place or second place in Sci-Fi Diorama 2016. That's me. There are so many categories here, and the miniature scene is not as great or developed yet. The tabletop miniature hobbyists here plan to send more and more models every year and grow that representation. If you're a tabletop miniature hobbyist, chances are the representation in your local chapter's IPMS is not as big, and it's your chance to sort of represent and win early awards and make a name for tabletop miniatures to other hobbyists out there. Because while I'm here advocating learning from others' hobbies, I'm sure other hobbyists, other models from different parts or different tangents of our whole community can learn something from our tabletop miniature world. And I did experience that. I met a lot of people. Now, this IPMS Nationals is held every year, And you do meet a lot of these hobbyists. You do get to interact and learn from one another, and it's one of the great things I like about going here personally. While you do have the option, at least we had the option of just sending our model and praying for an award, I did get to stay there with a lot of our Pilipintados, our tabletop miniature hobby group here in the Philippines. If you are from the Philippines and you do want to participate in one soon, while you don't have to wait next year for next year's IPMS Nationals, there is an IPMS Baguio being organized by the IPMS Baguio chapter in coordination with the IPMS Manila chapter, and there will be displays and competitions, if I'm not mistaken, in Baguio this coming August. So if you're a tabletop miniature hobbyist, send those entries. If you are a hobbyist that's related to ours, like the hobbies I've mentioned prior, I will put all the links in the description so you guys can keep watch of when the announcements are to come. I hopefully will be there, but definitely I will be submitting lots and lots of entries for this IPMS to represent our tabletop community hobby. If you aren't from the Philippines, again, I urge you to look for any chapter out there and represent. And let me know down in the comments what your IPMS chapter is doing if you're outside the Philippines. Ultimately, it's nice to be with a lot of hobbyists after such a long time of being hauled up in pandemic. And this is probably one of the first big hobby events we've gone through together. If you're still here, thanks for being here. I really appreciate your support for my videos. I do make this really as a hobby and as a way to really share what I can share and give back to the hobby, because the hobby has really given me a lot of joy, and I feel like sharing my thoughts and videos sort of pushes someone's journey forward, and I hope that person is you, or I hope I am pushing your journey somewhat forward. Please take the time to get outside of your hobby comfort zone and learn something new from a different hobby perspective or art perspective altogether. There's a lot of talent to go around, not just within our miniature tabletop community, but in other tabletop or other hobby communities as well. Thank you so much again for staying. This has been Louie of Louie Loves Minis, reminding you to hobby every day to keep the sprues away. And yes, I did keep a tagline for those people who are kind enough to keep track of my personal identity crisis with my online persona. So thank you guys for the reassurance. Thank you guys for supporting who I really am. Thank you guys for supporting and loving the brand Louie Loves Minis. I hope to be creating more videos soon. I hope to be helping more people soon in some way. Thanks, guys. See you.